After that, the team really got excited about their disc profiles and that they had these new tools where they could better communicate with each other and with me. And so we decided we all printed out our disc profile and taped it to our door. So we're trying to be mindful before you even enter into someone's office, what their profile is and how you can communicate with them and be more effective in your communications with them.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hi, Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we're going to work on a particular conversation around how to build a great practice, how to improve your life around the DISC profile. And today we have attorney Ashley Waters, who's volunteered to come on and talk about her use of the DISC profile and how the DISC helps you build a great practice, make more money, and actually have a great life all at the same time. So with that, Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I don't think I had much of a choice because Lori Pulvermacher said you have to have Ashley on. And in my world, when Lori says something, I go do it.
She's pretty smart.
Yeah, she's pretty smart.
Yeah,
she's pretty smart. She's been on here at least once or twice, I think. So she's pretty smart. So let's talk a little bit about your practice briefly so people can have a context about your practice. Then we'll dive into the DISC. So where do you practice? What do you do?
So my practice is in rural Tennessee, Cookeville, Tennessee, which is kind of in between Nashville and Knoxville. And I have a niche practice, mostly estate planning and estate administration. So I've been practicing for a little over 10 years, have had my own private, just been a solo practitioner for the last 5.
Gotcha. So you were in a practice for 5, opened up your own shop about 5 years ago, and you are in a niche practice in a rural community, which everybody says can't be done. So good for you, good for you. So well done. Well done. So talk to me briefly about what brought you to Atticus. How did you get introduced to Atticus? How did you start working with Lori?
Well, so when I chose to open my own practice 5-ish years ago, I wanted to work smarter, not harder. I wanted it to invest in technology and systems and people and processes to try to grow my business, but I didn't really want to work a lot more. So I started exploring different coaching options. I did some private coaching with a life coach. I actually do some coaching with another group program as well, and just wasn't really gaining any traction. And I went to CleoCon, probably, I guess it would be going on 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, and met someone there who had an estate planning practice in, I think, California. And she said, you've got to do Atticus. I don't know why you're doing anything else. And so I left CleoCon, emailed Atticus, and immediately signed up for private coaching. So Lori Pulvermacher has been my coach. I think it's been over 2 years now. And so I started with private coaching, which was really helpful. But I always kind of struggled with not knowing how I fit in terms of relating to how other practices like mine would work, and just kind of missing out on the community aspect of group coaching. So I went to Summit a couple years, or I guess a year and a half ago. And from that, decided to join the Practice Growth Program. So I've been doing that for going on a year. And so currently I'm doing both the Practice Growth Program and private coaching. And both have been extremely helpful in different ways.
That's great. That's fantastic. So I got a couple of questions for you, and then we'll dive into the primary topic, what was the problem that brought you to Atticus? What was it? Just working smarter, knowing that there had to be a shortcuts, or was there a particular issue?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was one particular issue. Being especially being a solo practitioner, you've got to be a lawyer, but you also have to run your business. And so I feel like I know how to be a lawyer, but I wasn't doing a great job of running my business. And I have my MBA, but they just don't teach you. They don't teach you in law school how to run a practice. And getting your MBA doesn't mean you know how to hit the ground running. So I was looking for resources and people where I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, who did things similar to me, who could say, "Hey, try it this way. We tried it this way. This worked. This didn't work." So that's kind of what I was looking for, and just knowing that I'm not the expert and that I need to find somebody else who can teach me and guide me and help me to improve my practice.
That's fairly strategic thinking. I mean, it usually takes about a decade, in my experience, before a lawyer goes, there might be a quicker, shorter, cheaper way of doing this, and I need to get help. And so you did that pretty quickly, coming right out of the a block, so to speak. You went right into your own practice and said, I got to find a solution. Tried a life coach, didn't get traction. Tried another company that didn't work so well. But you're now, and hopefully will be with us for a long period of time. How's the experience between the group program and one-on-one working for you?
The difference between the two, or how they work together.
Well, how they work together is fine.
Okay. So the group program I find very helpful because it's away from the office. So I think it's really important sometimes to get away and to focus on your practice and not be working in your practice or have the distractions. I like getting away. And then just having your peers around you and having a coach there to walk you through whatever you're discussing at that session. So that's been really helpful for me in having peers who I can talk through things with. And your coach can say, "Hey, this is what I want you to take away from this," and then you go, "But how am I going to do that?" And then you talk to the people that are there with you, and they say, "Well, this is what we did," or "We've tried this, it didn't work." So it's just that's very helpful, having peers there to communicate with. On the private side of things, the private coaching side, it's more specific. So if I've been able to work them together. So if I go to a practice growth program session and I were talking about hiring, then and I have ideas and takeaways from that session, then I can go back to my coach and say, "Hey, I really want to do this. This is on my 90-day, goals now." And so what resources does Atticus have? How can you help me in my specific practice to achieve that goal? And so the private's very helpful, being really specific and addressing specific issues or different things that come up. Before I even did the practice growth program, it would be hiring issues or even just employee reviews, like different things that would come up, and I would say, "I need help with this." And so Lori would help me with specific issues that come up.
It's a wonderful blend. It's designed, both are designed differently. And you kind of nailed it. You go from large theory, like, okay, here's a strategy. How do I apply this strategy? Now, how do I apply this strategy practically to my practice? And, how, and then you get in the nitty gritty, like, what's that actually look like day to day? What's it look like day to day? So it's really brilliant on your part. I think my guess about 20 to 25% of our clients do both for the same reason: the strategy, big picture, learning quicker. You really get inspired from other people when you go to group programs. You learn a lot of different things in a day and a half. And I know it's an investment. It's an investment of time, but you also have kids. You also are married. It's an investment also of being away from your family to really work on being a better family. So how's that working for you? I mean, I assume it's still working for you because you're still doing it.
It is. Well, in my work schedule, I just have to block that time off. I just have to get ahead of my own appointments and just block that time off. And luckily, I have a very supportive husband who has always encouraged me to do what I need to do to improve my practice. And he is an entrepreneur as well, and so I think he sees the value in investing in things like this. He was actually the one who introduced me conceptually to coaching in the first place. So that he's very supportive. And I have found that this investment has actually created more time that I'm able to spend with my family because I have been able to implement different ideas and processes, systems, hiring the right people, which actually has freed me up more. So even though I'm investing and I might be away, 4 times a year at PGP, for a couple of days, the net result is that I actually have more time with my family. And so I also think it's important with my children, they're 9 and 11. I want them to see that you have to invest in yourself in order to be better at what you do and to be, that investment in Atticus for me makes me a better lawyer, a better boss, a better leader, and a better mom and a better wife. So I kind of, I want them to see that and kind of model that for them.
I think it's a perfect, fantastic. I think well done, very well done. Speaking of investments, let's talk about your use of the disc. Because my understanding is that your use of the disc profiles really transformed your practice and transformed your thinking about growing your practice. Is that a fair statement? Is that too deep of a statement?
No, that's very fair. It took me a while to get to that realization, but yes, it has definitely been huge for me in my practice.
Well, before we get in deep, would you like to talk about what the disc profile is for someone who's not listening to? Let me try that again. Would you like to talk about the disc profile conceptually, like big picture, so someone who's part of the audience that has no idea what it is can have an understanding, or would you like me to do that?
Well, since you're the expert, why don't you do
I would never consider myself an expert on disc.
that?
I would consider the company really strong on disc. So let's set it up just from a big picture.
Okay.
And so people who are not used to disc profile, and for those of you that are, I'll just go through like a 2 to 3 minute explanation. And Ashley will talk about yours if that works for you, and then talk about how you use the profile for hiring, training, etc. So the disc profile is really designed from the perspective of how you prefer the world to work. It was designed by a guy named William Marston. There's about 50 million people that have taken the profile. And William was a Harvard psychologist, I think in the 30s. And he was trying to figure out what he considered behavioral norms. He invented the word normal, so to speak. And he went to find how people prefer the world to work. And he came down to 4 profiles. And the profiles are dominant, which is to the extent that you want to take charge, be in control, respond to challenges. I, influence, which is really to the extent that you try and solve problems through people. And you're more persuasive. You're more relationship driven. S, steadfast. And the S is more security, more process driven. C is really more around the conscientious. It stands for conscientious, sorry, but it's a little bit more analytical, a little bit more dot the I's, cross the T. I am a CD, which is process my way. And so the joke that I've had for years is process my way now. And that's kind of how I see the world. And everything that I do is process driven. Now, my guess is you're the exact opposite of me just based on our conversation. So what's your profile?
I am a high D all the way. Um, my next highest is I, but it's still it's not quite above the line. So I'm just a high D.
High D, high I. So I was guessing higher I and lower on the D. So I was not totally wrong, but I was in the same neighborhood. Now, why was this a breakthrough for you? What did this do for you? And before we get too far, sorry, I'm going to tell the audience. We'll link a couple other episodes we've done. I've done an episode with Sean McNallis and a couple other people on the disc profiles. We'll link those below. And if there's more information you want to know about the profile, if you want to get your own test done, we'll give you links for doing that as well. So don't worry about that. All that stuff will be in the show notes. What I want you to do is listen to how Ashley learned about it and how she started to use it. So sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I first was introduced to DISC by my private coach, Lori. And so she asked me to do the assessment for myself, I think as much so she would understand me and how to communicate better with me and work with me. So I did the disc and learned that I was a high D. And so Lori and I really used that through our coaching the first year that I was just doing the private coaching with her. And she would kind of teach things to me, knowing and using my disc assessment and how I would be able to relate, or how she could explain things to me in a way that was relatable. And she, at the time, I was going through quite a bit. I was going through a hiring struggle. I was trying to fill a position for a paralegal, and I am in a rural community, so they're kind of few and far between. And she would tell me, you've got to have the disc assessment's got to be part of your hiring strategy. And I heard her, but I didn't really hear her. And so I went through a handful of hires, and most of which did not work out. Before finally I thought maybe there's something to this. So I implemented the disc assessment. I narrow in the hiring process. Once the candidate would get to a certain point, then I would have them do the disc assessment to see what their profile looked like, and if their behavior profile would match with the position that we were trying to fill. And then I worked through that with Lori. Like, because I'm no expert on disc. I think that's important, is we don't have to be the expert on disc. We have, people we can lean on who can help us to understand. And so she would help me to review, the disc profile of this new candidate together with mine. And at that point, I had had my entire team do a profile and how this person would fit into the mix, and whether that person would be a good fit for the specific role that we were hiring for at the time. So that's kind of how I started with it in the beginning, and then just leaned into it more and more as time went on. Now we use it daily in our practice. We have all taken the disc assessment. We've done some training with Lori, so that not just I understand what the different profiles mean, but so the whole team understands the profiles and how they can work better together and communicate better with each other. But that's kind of how I learn to lean into it a little bit more.
Nothing is going to impact your law practice like AI. The impact of AI on the legal industry will be transformative. The question is, are you prepared? Now, I've done a podcast on this previously, the 3 challenges of integrating AI into your law practice. One of the things I want to remind you is that we're teaching in 2025 a Grow Your Practice with AI course. Now, this will be taught 4 times live, but it includes 22 hours of previously recorded episodes in 2024. So episodes that we taught everything from how to use AI to look at deposition, go through complex documents, how to train your team using AI as a shortcut for team training. All those different courses are recorded and ready for your viewing. Now, if you're an Atticus member, it's already included in your membership. All you have to do is sign up for the class. We'll teach it 4 times live in 2025. Now, if you're new to Atticus and you're not an existing member, the investment is $1,500 for this program. $1,500 covers it all of 2025. Furthermore, if you are an audience member and you want to take advantage of a special code just for audience members, the code is AI Podcast 300. So when you register, it takes $300 off your investment. So the $1,500 drops to $1,200. So if you haven't taken advantage of this, it's a no-brainer deal. So if you're new to Atticus and you want to check us out, this is a great way of checking us out. It's a virtual program, so you don't have to travel anywhere. I promise you, you'll make 10 times that investment back. So with that, the information on how to register is in the link below. Look forward to seeing you there. That's perfect. So the paralegal that you were looking for, what was the profile you were looking for and why? Do you remember?
Well, this would have been an estate planning paralegal. And so I needed someone who was attentive to detail, but also could interact with the clients. I needed somebody who was intelligent, who was a critical thinker. And so those were really now I will say, in hiring, I actually did end up hiring a paralegal for this position who had previous experience, But in every other position that I've ever hired, I hired someone who had little to no experience in the legal field, and I've trained them. And so for me, it was more important to find somebody with the ability to do what I needed them to do so that I could train them on the specifics of what they needed to know. But I needed to know that they were trainable.
Character, skills, then you can train them.
Mhm.
And in between character and skills was the disc profile. When you said, okay, I'm looking for this estate planning paralegal, did you say, okay, I want a profile that looks like a CS, like a conscientious, steadfast? Because I would imagine what you're describing is the opposite of you. This would not be a dominant influencer. A dominant influencer is going, let's get stuff done. Let's get it done now. If there's a mistake, we'll charm our way through it. Right. And a high CS is going to be follow the process, dot the I's, cross the T's. What were you looking for? Do you recall?
Well, I think when we first started the process of trying to find the right person, I didn't know what I was looking for in terms of the DISC assessment because I had not fully implemented that in the hiring process. But the more I got into that and we went through some turnover in that position, I realized I did need to kind of define what I was looking for. So I definitely a CS, but also with some I, because I think it's important. The I think is helpful in being able to interact with other people, and so I don't want to forego that. I need somebody who's willing to, in my practice, this person communicates directly with my clients and with potential, like with referral sources. And so I need somebody with a little bit of I in there, but mostly the C and the S would be what I was looking for.
That's perfect. So I want people to hear your thinking on that. So strategically, you're thinking, okay, I don't need somebody who's got the same profile as me. I got enough of me. What I need to do is think, what does that role do? Well, that role is going to interface with clients. I'd like to see some level of I. I'd like to see some level of C. I'd like to see some level of S. So as you listen to Ashley, what you're probably going to go through is trying to think in your practice where those holes are, where you're like, okay, this person's skills are good, but what they're currently doing from a profile perspective is not. They may not be customer focused. They may not be relationship focused. My experience has been that people usually, especially if they're high DI, dominant influencer, will hire people just like themselves. The high SC will hire people just like themselves, and then be surprised that the person can't fill in the gaps in the practice that you need to fill. So you're actually consciously trying to define and design a team that works around your profile. I usually like to call it putting your wind at your back. Once you know your profile, then you can basically start to design people or design a team that supports your profile and doesn't run contrary to your profile. When you found the right person and you're like, okay, these are the right people on my team, how has the disc helped you train your team and improve communication?
So I think that's been huge for us. We actually, so I've said before, everyone on our team, which just to be clear, I have 4 full-time employees, I have 2 part-time employees, and I have some college students that will come back and work when they're on break. And then myself as well. So we have a relatively small team. I'm the only attorney. I'm a solo. So what we've done is everyone has completed a disc assessment, and we blocked out an entire day for us to get together in our conference room. We brought lunch in and we did a whole learning session with Lori, with my private coach, where she taught everyone kind of what disc is and why it's important. And so I think up until that point, no one really understood kind of, well, okay, so I know what my disc is, but how does that, affect me at work, or how does that, what does that do for me? And so Lori was really able, being an expert, I think, on disc, was really able to come in and show us all why understanding each other's profiles was important, and different tools for communicating with each other, and also how to deal with sometimes some difficult clients that you can once you understand the profiles, you can kind of figure out sometimes, well, that they may be a high D, and this might be a good way to work with them to, to interact with them or to deal with have a crucial conversation with them or deal with an issue that might be coming up. So we did that. It was a whole day of training with Lori. After that, the team really got excited about their disc profiles and that they had these new tools where they could better communicate with each other and with me. And so we decided we all printed out our disc profile and taped it to our door. So we're trying to be mindful before you even enter into someone's office, what their profile is and how you can communicate with them and be more effective in your communications with them. So we've really leaned into it that way. We've also, with the disc and the team, I am always looking at, how do I work smarter, not harder? How can I improve? I think we have a great practice, but how can we make that better? There's always room for improvement. And so as we are growing our team, we're looking at where individuals are, what, what their profiles are and what tasks they're doing that they enjoy or that they don't enjoy, and which tasks they're doing that align with their profiles. And then if we're hiring a new position, what do we want that new role to be? And really being very intentional about carving that out and making sure that we're using the team in the way that makes them the happiest, that they're going to be the most productive at based on their profiles. And then filling the gap, as you were saying before, with somebody new who will be able to pick up those, other responsibilities that maybe, would fit better with a different profile. So we've used it even in shifting tasks among our team members. Once we realize somebody, if somebody's a really high C, then they're very compliant. They're a rule follower. And so when we have a process that needs to be followed, that would be a great person to say, hey, why don't you take over this specific process? So we've tried to be very mindful of that and just always looking at how we can kind of reallocate our resources and making sure we're utilizing the team in the most efficient, effective way possible.
Now, that makes perfect sense. I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. And it gives you kind of a secret source code to taking your team and giving them power to use their profiles to make a greater impact on your team. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Now, when I first learned the profiles, and I'm going to go just for reviewing with everybody, every profile has a soft underbelly. Every profile has a fear. Every profile comes at that fear from a different angle. So, for me, you'll see the profiles flare up usually at work, and you also see the profiles flare up in mediations. You'll see the profiles flare up in referral relationships, and like you said, with clients. So I'm just going to review those so listeners can kind of get a sense of this, why it's so powerful. So the soft underbelly, the fear of a high D, a dominant profile, is loss of control and being taken advantage of. The high I influencer, usually for them, is loss of social status or social rejection. One of the biggest things, Ashley, and I'm sure this is not a problem for you, but for high I's who are lawyers, they are my biggest discounters. So if I start working for a lawyer who is a high I, the first thing I start to do is I start looking at their pricing, I start looking at their accounts receivables, I start looking at what they're doing, because more than likely, that's where we might have cash flow and pricing issues, because generally speaking, they like the relationship more than the money. So they generally are my biggest discounters. C's, usually, this is a very interesting thing about a C, their greatest fear is criticism of their work, not loss of control, not social ostracization, but actually criticism of their work. And the high S is change. It doesn't have to be good change, high steadfast. It doesn't have to be good change or bad change. It doesn't matter. Any form of change seems to cause a huge level of stress. So one of the things I have to coach the lawyers on when they come back from a program, especially a high DI, they're like, "Oh, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be terrific." They go back to their team, all excited and fired up, and the team's like, "Okay, if we can just wait them out 3 days, maybe 4 days, right? If we can wait out 3 or 4 days, we can distract them sufficiently, give them enough crises to work on, and then we can go back to life as normal."
That sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar, right? And
Mhm.
usually what I recommend is that if you're going back to a team, especially if you're high D or high I, you don't go back and say, "I just came back from this awesome Atticus thing and we're going to change everything." You go back and say, "That was really good. We're going to make a couple of slight adjustments and we're going to make some tweaks to how we do things just to reduce your stress and make things easier on the clients." So you start to translate into their profiles how you're going to implement change. How am I going to implement change based on the profile? So it's a very powerful thing. Sometimes people go into it thinking it's a straitjacket, like, "Well, I'm a high DI. This is how the world works." No, that's when you start to become conscious of how your world works, not how the world works. It's how you want the world to work. So you start to become very self-aware of how do I translate into other people's lives. In your experience working with the disc, where has this helped you? Have you seen yourself translate and adjust to team or referral sources or clients where you've adjusted your communication to them?
Yeah, and I would say so with the team, being a high D, I have a tendency to come across as abrupt and I just kind of want to get to the point and I just feel like people shouldn't take it personally. It's just business. And I've
I'm
really
shocked by this, Ashley. I'm shocked.
yeah, right. And so I've realized, which I knew this, but this is kind of confirmed for me that, not everybody works that way. And so
I'm even more shocked now. I'm just like, this is mind blowing.
well, and I used to think, well, can't they just adapt to me? But now I realize that in order for me to be effective, which is really what I want, right? It's, I don't need to be right. I just want to be effective. And so for me to be effective, I have to really figure out how to communicate better with them to get what I want. And it feels a little bit like, or it sounds a little bit like manipulation. I don't in a good way. It's just utilizing these tools, these resources that we have to learn when I do come back and I want to implement something, or if I'm trying to give constructive feedback on, in a review or something like that. It's how can I present this to this particular employee in a way where I don't want to beat them down. I just want to make them better and more productive. So it's really helped me in that way in trying to learn all of the profiles for my team members and just being able to better communicate with them, which makes them better at what they're doing and just overall makes us more effective.
That's great. I'm going to encourage you not to look at it from manipulation, but I'm going to encourage you to look at it from the perspective of finding and helping people where they're at. So I kind of think of it like speaking French to the French, Spanish to the Spanish, Russian to the Russians, and of course, English to the Americans or, UK, their brand of English. So, really, what you're trying to do is go into their world and talk to them the way they want the world to work. And I think it's one of the more powerful things that if you're able to shift, really what I'm trying to do is help talk to them in the way they want to be spoken to. What you're going to do is reduce their stress, but ultimately improve your communication, which will save you time and stress in the process. And just what you said, some people get hung up. No, I want them to come to me. I want it to be my way. I want to be right about this. And sometimes you have to give up and you're doing it brilliantly. I don't want to be right. I want to be effective. And there's a big distinction between workability, getting things to work in your life, versus being right about how things should work. And I think you've shifted very powerfully there. So I'm going to encourage you not to look at it as manipulation, but to look as just speaking another language, going into their world, speaking to them in a way they want to be spoken to. It'll make a huge difference. It's just like the same thing with love languages. You're just going to translate, how can I talk to them in their world so that they appreciate what I'm saying in a more impactful and meaningful way? Does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah. And I've used this, not just with employees, but with my spouse, and with, clients. And so, I mean, it translates to every area, even my friends, I've used it with them. I don't know their exact profiles, but I can guess. And so,
Well done. Well done. Once you start to talk to your spouse in their profile and your friends in their profile and your parents in their profile, and you start to realize, your children, everybody around you is running some kind of profile. And what you're trying to do is figure out, how do I help them get what they want, and talk to them in that profile. So it's a very powerful shift. Sometimes lawyers will get hung up and say, well, I'm a DI. This is how I should operate. No, 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 no. That's when you start to become conscious as a human being on how you can help other human beings. So it's very powerful. Well done. Really well done. Got a couple other questions for you. You ready?
yeah, sure.
Now, one of the big criticisms we often receive, or sometimes, I should say criticism, sometimes we have to take a great big virtual yellow highlighter and highlight this for people. So, how would you tell lawyers that are listening to this how this helps them make more money? How does it help them drive more money, either gross, net? How does it help them come out ahead to waste such silliness and learn such silly things as a disc profile? Why should they do this?
Well, I mean, if you are more effective at communicating to get and to achieve an end result, then that end result comes more quickly and more efficiently, more cost effectively. For instance, like in the hiring process, if I had implemented DISC earlier in the hiring process, if I'd listened to Lori when she kept telling me you need to do this instead of having to learn kind of the hard way, I would have saved probably a year of searching for the right candidate and a year of being able to really get caught up with my work in that area. And so it's an investment in time ultimately, because you're learning this. It's helping you to achieve results you're looking for more quickly, more effectively, which then translates to more income because you're able to grow your practice. You can focus on other areas, you can grow your practice more quickly as well. So I have definitely found that we've had a record year this year. We've grown every single year that we've been in business as with my new firm that I've had for 5 years, and it's been tremendous growth in these last 2 years. And I do attribute that to, a big part of that to using DISC to better communicate with clients and with employees, because you just get where you need to go more quickly and more efficiently. And you're not wasting your time.
I love it. And for those of you that didn't quite hear what she said around the team, my experience is that if you understand the profiles when it comes to marketing, you'll be far more effective with clients and far more effective with referral sources. There's nothing quite as enjoyable to me as when a high D lawyer would, a high D client would walk into my office and say, bottom line, what's this going to cost? And then I would say, okay, I know who I'm dealing with here. Bottom line. Um, the other side of that is that I had a high C walk in and say, I did a lot of research on this and I explained, I've done the analysis, and here's my spreadsheet. I'm laughing because I used to get tons and tons of engineers as clients. And then I said, oh, got it. Hold on. Let me get my packet. Here's my engineer packet. Boom, boom, and I'll email it to you as well. So we're going to do, you're that guy. So we'll do that. So we're cool. So, it's important that you'll find ways to save time, improve communication, reduce stress. But if you're clear on profiles, you can price to profiles. And this is a lot of things that lawyers don't understand, that you can price to profiles and you can actually design your process around certain profiles. So there's a lot of fun here. Before we start to wrap up, anything else that you want to encourage other lawyers to take on or consider with DISC profiles?
So I think that the biggest takeaway for me, the biggest recommendation I would have for other attorneys, if you have not taken the DISC yourself, do it. And if you have not had every member of your team take the DISC assessment, do that. And then get together and train, whether you're the one training them or if you bring somebody in, somebody from Atticus or somebody in to help train them on the different profiles and how they work together and how they can communicate better with each other. I think that has been the single biggest thing that I've done in the past probably year and a half with DISC that has had the biggest impact across my team. I think it's helped tremendously with the culture here at the office. I think that it's made us more productive. I think that it's enabled us to work better with those difficult clients, being able to identify the high D or the high C or, whatever it is. And so that would be the biggest thing is just have everybody do the DISC, understand what everybody's profile is, and learn a little bit about that and how you can use that where everybody, to help people communicate better with each other and also with your clients. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I would say if you haven't done that yet.
That's fantastic. It's really been transformative for you. It's been really transformative for a lot of lawyers I've worked with. I think about some of my high D clients that are in a position where they're like, just like you, bottom line, let's get this done. Why are you still in my office talking? And right. And they're talking to a super high I who's part of their marketing team who's like, how was your weekend? How are you doing? How are the kids? And they're trying to develop rapport and relationship with you. And you're looking at them like, why? What are you doing? Like, what's this thing happening right here? Right. And so it's important to understand that you're like, oh, I see what's happening. Oh, I'm good. How was your weekend? How are your kids? And so you have the whole rapport dance going because they need it. They want it. They want to feel like they're meaningful to you. They want to feel like you matter and they matter. So it's really important to understand and appreciate. So really well done. Ashley, thanks for taking time to come on here and be vulnerable. And you've really done a lot of growth in 5 years. When you think about it, 5 years of growth, the team that you built in a rural community in Tennessee, niching, is really well done. Very, very well done. I'm very excited to see what the next 5 years will bring. I'm very excited to have you on future podcasts because you're really growing in an intentional, strategic way. And thanks for sharing your thoughts and insights about the DISC today. I hope other members of our community appreciate what you've done and will take your advice.
Thank you for having me on. I look forward to hopefully doing this again.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.